In the summer months, Old Cinny, or otherwise known as Sea Mother, would wake up from her slumber over winter and bring life to Shetland. And then over the winter months, Taran would wake up and bring darkness and disease and kill off people, and food became scarce. It's how Shetlanders explained the changing of the seasons. In a month or two, the sea will start getting rougher and the wind will pick up and storms will start happening again. And what that is the eternal battle between them both.
Been around here all my life, so you do get to know a place, and there's always a bit of history cropping up, and you remember things when you're out there. The beaches at the west side where I live now, great sandy beaches. Our family goes down there, and you know, all my grandchildren, they loved it. My children loved it. Yeah, there's lots of good, significant places here.
In Shetland, we are so lucky in that we have the mainland and all the opportunities that come with that, but we also have these kind of little jewels in, around the island that have, some of the most beautiful landscapes.
You see seals, you see otters, but one of the most spectacular things that I've ever seen out the window was there was 5 seals in the dock, and they were pushing the shoal of fish in, and the gulls were going demand trying to get the fish. The seals would get the fish in their mouth, and the gulls would come down and pick it out of the seals' mouths.
A few months ago, we had killer whales that came and visited my brother, working on the mussel lines, and just as it was passing the boat, it just looked up at Marvin, and he said he felt that he was being watched, not the other way around.
Shetland has the highest density of Eurasian otter anywhere in the world, and Yell is it's a good place to see them. It's also a very quiet place to see them, so you can have your own sort of wildlife time, without being interrupted, which is a bonus.
Whenever anybody says sea to me, I instantly comes into my head seabirds, because I take people to show them all the fantastic birds we have here in Shetland. I mean, it's one of the best places to see seabirds in the world, probably.
I think coming from such a small place, particularly an island, it makes people band together more. Whether or not people have disagreements, people will generally look out for each other.
The community in Fair Isle is a very rural community. It has, the issues that come with that, very susceptible to population decline as people are moving to the mainland, perhaps for other opportunities. They are faced with a lot of pressure. They've got to maintain their services for their island as a small community, and it's not very viable to have lots of people coming in to do those jobs because of the distance.
Look, when we grew up, there was no doctor. Well, there's no doctor in Skerries, but even then, when there was more people, there was no doctor. So if you needed to see a doctor about anything, you had to either go to Lerwick or Walsa. I think it was usually Lerwick.
Our current system of connections is the roll-on, roll-off ferries. And that's been great for years, but things move on, and other areas have different systems. Most Shetlanders would value having fixed links to the islands, and that would be such a benefit to broadening the economy.
In the grand scheme of things, we're tiny, but people always come here to tell us that it's something special, and I think through time we begin to realise that is the case. It is a unique little place.
For an island community, the sea is just absolutely of paramount importance, whether it's connections or food for the sea, for livelihoods, and for pleasure as well.
We have fishing vessels from all over Shetland, all over Scotland that comes in here to land fish because the port has all the facilities they need. We're close to all the salmon farms, so the aquaculture and salmon is landed here, mussels is landed here, crab and lobster, it all comes here to this tiny wee port, so it's a very important place.
There's more fish landed in Shetland than in England, Wales and Northern Ireland combined. And just hold that statistic for a moment and just think about that. More fish landed here than in England, Wales, Northern Ireland combined. It shows how incredibly important seafood is to Shetland.
I think people have seen the opportunity to make seriously good livings out of it. I'm not sure when the mussel farms started, but that has added to the economy hugely, providing lots of jobs. When you go down to Cully Road Pier, it's just a hive of activity.
And when the oil industry came, it really changed the whole face of everything around Shetland. I mean, they built the largest oil terminal in Europe up here at Solonvo. Because the council was rich, obviously, they spent a lot of money here. We got really good roads, new schools. The airport was all done up because it was really busy. Really, they spent a lot of money on the infrastructure in Shetland.
Previously in the past, it was predominantly things like industry, for example, and fishing would be the key things, but now it's moved that way that it's around well-being, health, recreation. Industry still continues, it's kind of diversified. You've got aquaculture, fishing does continue, employs a number of people in Shetland on both fishing and aquaculture, but I think there's this more kind of social aspect to it too.
I took my father-in-law fishing just out here on off Bressay last night, and some mackerel and cod and haddock, and so we smoked some of that last night, and we had that. So, and I do get seafood from a good friend, crabs and lobsters as well. So yeah, I mean, we love seafood. Yeah.
I mean, of course, for me, it is work, but it's also somewhere that I go, you know, to get ideas, creativity, you know, become thinking of new ideas for images.
Moving to Shetland has changed everything. It's changed my colour scheme, it's changed my themes. When we first moved up, I was looking at exploring the landscape. I say landscape, probably seascape's a more appropriate word, because everything I do has got sea, rock faces. A lot of it's to do with the texture. That's what's really attracted me to it.
My daughter-in-law, she does a lot of craft work and things. So she's forever down on the beach looking for stones and bits of glass. And I think she uses seaweed sometimes as well, I think, in some of the things she does. So.
Yeah, it does actually make me feel better. I can't really explain that, but the sound of running water, you know, is a very relaxing thing. I suppose it's a kind of safe place, really, for me. When you're confident about any situation, when you're confident about it, then you feel safe.
When I think of the sea, then I think of looking out onto the horizon and the sea sparkling and shining in the sunshine.
Years ago, when me and my husband had been out, and he would be putting me home, and the moon would be shining on the water, and he always sung to me. With the moon upon the water, watch the stars light up the sky. Wherever you are, darling, my heart will always be.
It makes me feel connected to our history. It's everywhere, all the way along the coast. You can see from the Neolithic to modern. You get people coming up from south, and they're like a little bit envious of it because all they see is city blocks, whereas I see my ancestry, my heritage, my history. It's all right in front of me. It's on my doorstep.
There was crofts and skerries. They're not running the crofts anymore, but when we grew up, we had the croft, so we were looking after the land and the sheep and all the animals.
You crofted and you had your boat, so you could go and get your pilticks, and then you dry your pilticks for the winter. In fact, it was lovely. Yesterday I was out working in the garden, looked up to my neighbour, and on the washing line were all the pilticks hanging up drying. And that's a real old tradition. So that's still going on.
Some of the biggest traditions in Shetland is the fishing. So that was a huge income for a lot of the people on Fair Isle. Historically, it would have been how they survived.
There were 2 boats drawn up on the Merrick Beach, and we used to use Bobby's boat, go off on Bobby's boat, and of course if you've been at Merrick Beach you realise that it's big rollers coming in and it's not conducive to launching a boat very easily. So we used to drag it down for the grass that was up above, and we used what we called linds, and the boat rolled over that, and then we would run and put another pit prop in front of the boat, and then this one would come out there saying we'd run again and put the boat on until we got it into the sea.
I've always been interested. I'm not saying if I'd gone on board a fishing boat and been not maybe sick and certainly not strong enough to do the fisherman's work. No way at that time could a girl, I think, have done that. But I just always had a really strong interest in the fishing.
Even though women didn't go to sea, the fishermen couldn't have done what they did without the women looking after the children, operating the croft, and crucially managing the family finances. A great tradition in Shetland. When the fisherman came ashore from his fishing trips, he handed his wife the entire earnings, and when he went back to sea, the women had the responsibility of looking after the money and making sure it was spent properly.
Fishermen can be very superstitious. They are very superstitious, yeah. My father was very superstitious. He never ever turned his boat anti-clockwise in his life. Never ever. Always would be clockwise.
Every place, I would say, in Shetland has its own dialect. It'll be words said maybe the same, but it'll have the same meaning, but it'll be said in different ways. But we have a very different language.
Yeah, I am Knappen, yeah. I need to Knap because you wouldn't really understand me. We had the Vikings came here, and so we had the Norse. We've got a huge Norse influence, and a lot of place names and words we use are from the Old Norse.
A lot of our dialect that we speak is tied up in the sea and the land, and if you're not using it, that words don't get used and slowly get lost, and the dialect gets diluted each generation, I think.
My father used to sit and tell us stories the whole time, like old stories, because that's what they used to do, tell their children, and it just carried on doing the generations. But that's being lost as well, because nobody's speaking the same, nobody's telling stories the same. But after he died, I was so vexed that I didn't record or write down the stories he was told me, and that's why I decided to try and write as much as I could about the old days and any information I could gather, just so it doesn't get lost.
I suppose we all have to say climate change has changed the weather conditions in Shetland. I mean, even when I've spoken to locals that have lived here all of their lives, they all say the same thing, that the weather is definitely totally changing here. I mean, even in the winter times it's totally different from the norm. So it has to be climate change.
We've got loads of wonderful words for snow, loads of different words to describe the weather patterns, everything. And so much of that's not being used anymore. I guess the one everyone knows is flukra, which is like your large fluffy snowflakes. A blindmoody is when it's so stormy you can't see. And I can't remember the last time it was that snowy, or where you would use those words.
I'm also very aware of the amount of bruck, as they call it up here, rubbish that's washed up. Again, the community are really good about having beach cleanups. That kind of faded away again with COVID, but it's starting to happen again.
I think the downside that I find with marine litter is it stops that feeling of being somewhere remote and pristine. Unfortunately, some beaches accumulate litter as well. They happen to be accumulated beaches. So you can go to somewhere that is like a long way from any population, but it's unfortunately one of those beaches that collects litter, and it very much brings you back to reality.
You look at the size of fishing boats these days, and the bigger fleet which you used to have is now obviously reduced. You know, you get bigger boats, more technology, obviously catching bigger weights of fish, having to go out less than they used to. So that's changed significantly.
Yeah, fishing boats got bigger, much bigger. That is a real change. The fishing boats are like mansions or something like that. They're absolutely massive, and they've got TVs and jacuzzis and gyms and all these things. And Forrest Licks and my dad was roughing it down in a little room or whatever, like half soaked with water and one thing and another. So yeah, the size of fishing vessels, I find it quite amazing.
When I left school, most of the boys went to the fishing. That was just what they did. But now they tend to go on to the school longer and get more education.
Gill netting is the big issue.
Biggest one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not only for the fishing, it's not only what's happening offshore, but then when you see nature and the way it's affecting it, and you see dead seals and birds, it's quite heartbreaking.
In Shetland we have a marine plan, so we've been doing marine spatial planning in Shetland now nearly for 20 years. So we have that, and that sets out policies for future development in Shetland waters, so it covers a wide range of different policies.
I mean, one of the big issues, I mean, it's a cumulative issue, is just the competition for the marine resource and space. You know, we have lots of industry here, aquaculture, fisheries. We've got a lot of development, particularly I think in the marine space now with the offshore wind. We have the oil. It's all this cumulative impact that I think is going to have the biggest issue.
The wind farms that's being spoken about is where they're intending to put them is not a very good place for the fishing. And the fishing industry is just so important to Shetland.
It's really complicated because the bottom line is we're going to have to stop burning fossil fuels, and so where are potential fuels for fishing boats going to come from in the future? And the answer really is probably from hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives, and they're going to be generated from offshore wind.
Whilst it could create great economic opportunities for Shetland and create really high-skilled jobs, it might also have negative impacts on rental prices and also potentially displace some of our other existing important activities.
In order to continue to produce food and continue to have those jobs, the seafood industry has to be managed sustainably. We can't take more fish than we should be taking. It's got to be caught in a way that ensures that plenty of young fish escape. Fish has got to be farmed in a way that's in harmony with the environment. And I think the seafood industry generally has made enormous progress in the last 20 years with Marine Stewardship Council and Aquaculture Stewardship Council accreditation.
I do believe that Shetland and Scottish fishermen that are here are as passionate as anybody could be about stock conservation, because after all, it's their livelihoods, it affects their whole community. Why would they not be?
The main thing is loss of fishing grounds. Fishing is a seasonal thing. The fish move around. Certain areas you fish at certain times a year for certain species of fish, and then you move. And we need all the area that we have to make a living, and to have whole massive areas cordoned off that we can't fish in will definitely have a detrimental effect on the fishing industry.
I think we all have a connection. I think island people are island people the world over. But the folk that make the decisions really don't ask us. And they don't listen.
We're very Lerwick-centric. And I think, to be honest, there's a lot of people who don't even know or recognise how much places like Yell and Onston, all these little places, even Skerries, contribute to the actual economy of Shetland. And I think that sometimes they're forgotten about and their needs are not always met.
I think the governments need to come and listen to local people, local fishermen, local business people first, ask them what's required and then make policy, rather than being dictated to.
One of the other things that would be really positive if we could think about how to include is more around people's values. We tend to consider things in socio-economic ways, or in marine planning, which I work in, we make maps, but they're quite static. It's how we work out how to allow those to be anything but static maps, are considering change over time or reflecting change over time.
Just would wish to see it prosper and continue, and for the future generations, that they can enjoy life as we have enjoyed life here. Hope that it can continue in that way.
But they might learn to swim in the swimming pool and
Yes,
not have to go and change
have
behind a dry state tank.
In the freezing cold.
I just really do hope that in 10 years' time we still have a valuable fishing industry going and everybody's healthy and happy.
You know, we're an isolated community. You know, I worry that we're a little bit too dependent on global systems which are unsustainable. And I think we really need to work on making ourselves a resilient community that's going to withstand the pressures of the future.
My vision for Shetland is to have as many people involved in the decision making for the protection and enhancement of our environment. People like the local authority, our communities, our academic institutes that we have here, and our NGOs and fisheries. We're making sure that we are doing all we can and working as collaboratively as possible for that goal.
Anything that works in communities, and I've seen this over the years, needs to come from grassroots. If an idea comes from down here and you support people to be able to do that, it'll work much more efficiently than some government in Scotland or down in London or whatever, winging in something.
Shetland, in my eyes, in the future, we would connect more with our culture, more with our heritage, really question and then understand what it means to be from an island and how important it is to look behind you and see who has been there before you, because only knowing where you're from can you know where you're going. I think the best way to preserve something is by talking about it.
Standing at the shore, beach, call